They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis. But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it.
Sunny Hostin, a prominent and often polarizing fixture on daytime television, recently experienced the on-air equivalent of a catastrophic system crash, an ego annihilation so profound it reportedly left her resembling a human puddle of regrets. What happens when the meticulous, data-driven demolition tactics of Charlie Kirk collide with the freewheeling, common-sense knockout punches of Joe Rogan? The answer, it seems, is the utter obliteration of a carefully constructed media persona. We're diving deep into the savage takedown that allegedly transformed Sunny Hostin from a confident commentator into a cautionary tale. A spectacle so dramatic that even seasoned soap opera writers were reportedly taking notes.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
Right. Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
For Sunny Hostin, it likely began as just another week navigating the familiar currents of televised discourse. A comfortable routine of confidently delivering her well-rehearsed worldview from the prominent pulpit of The View, basking in the warm, affirming glow of studio applause and the nods of her co-hosts. She was, by all accounts, comfortably ensconced in her role as a leading voice of progressive thought, a purveyor of what she undoubtedly considered enlightened perspectives. Little did she know, however, that a formidable two-pronged assault on her credibility, her very public persona, was silently, almost imperceptibly brewing. One meticulously launched from the polished podium of conservative commentary, and the other emerging with casual yet devastating force from the freewheeling intellectual playground of the podcasting world. First, the intellectual uppercut, delivered with surgical precision by Charlie Kirk. Often dubbed the Gen Z whisperer in a suit, Kirk arrived on the scene, metaphorically speaking, armed not with bluster, but with charts, graphs, and an almost unnerving command of data. With the focused intensity of a seasoned prosecutor, Kirk proceeded to dissect the phenomenon of elite media detachment, a condition he argued was perfectly, almost tragically, personified by hosts like Sunny Hostin. He highlighted the glaring, almost comical irony of millionaire pundits, ensconced in their luxurious Manhattan penthouses, pontificating on the struggles of oppression and economic hardship. He then deployed hard data, cold, undeniable facts, to systematically dismantle their often repeated narratives about voter demographics, particularly focusing on the significant and undeniable swing of minority voters towards conservative viewpoints. A trend that directly contradicted the prevailing wisdom espoused on shows like The View.
The culture shift between right and left authoritarianism, and now people don't recognize that if you just stop looking at it in terms of red and blue, look at the actions, whether it's war, suppression of free speech, pharmacological interventions that are mandatory, whatever it is, that used to all be associated with the authoritative right, the authoritarian right, and now those things are being embraced by the left. And I just think it's just an ideology thing, and I think we get confused and we think we're on the right side, and if it's our side that's saying this, for sure that's the right thing to do, and no one's critically thinking about this.
Joe Rogan is the gateway drug for young men that thought they were Democrats to become MAGA. Joe Rogan is the bridge, and on that bridge they'll see RFK.
Kirk, however, didn't pull any punches, didn't shy away from the uncomfortable truths. He specifically and relentlessly targeted the perceived elitism that seemed to permeate Sunny Hostin's on-air delivery. He called out with unsparing clarity the inherent condescension often directed towards those without college degrees, drawing a sharp, almost brutal distinction between academic knowledge, which he argued sometimes consisted of questionable relevance or even outright falsehoods, like men can allegedly give birth, and genuine, hard-won wisdom. The core of his critique, the central pillar of his argument, was this: Sunny Hostin and her ideological compatriots were, to put it mildly, utterly, almost comically, disconnected from the lived realities, the everyday concerns, and the deeply held values of a vast swath of ordinary American people. Then, emerging from the cultural octagon, from the unfiltered arena of independent thought, entered Joe Rogan. There were no meticulously prepared pie charts here, no carefully footnoted arguments, just raw, unadulterated common sense, wielded with the casual confidence of a man who has built an empire on fearless, freewheeling conversation. Rogan didn't engage in a point-by-point debate of policy positions. He ridiculed the entire premise, the very existence of personalities like Sunny Hostin and the media ecosystem they inhabit. He likened her particular brand of televised media to group therapy for people allergic to introspection, a scathing indictment of what he perceived as a performative, self-congratulatory, and ultimately hollow form of public discourse. He ruthlessly called out the rampant virtue signaling, the carefully curated outrage, and the suffocating echo chamber environment that seemed to define such programs.
The final point I'll say is this, is Sunny, you guys thought that abortion was going to be this like quasi-zealot religious issue. I'm pro-life. If people in the audience aren't, that's fine. What I'm saying though, what gives me promise, and I think we can all agree on this, is that there are other issues that should animate and drive our politics other than this very divisive one. And I was really encouraged by that, Megan. Very encouraged, because the media was forcing this as an up or down vote on a referendum on a highly complicated, very emotional, very personal issue. And it turned out the American people were like, yeah, actually, these other 6 things matter more.
Rogan, with his characteristic blend of gym locker room wisdom and unexpected philosophical depth, went even further, questioning the very process by which these figures even became anointed as cultural gatekeepers in the first place. He lambasted mainstream talk shows for devolving into echo chambers of elite self-regard, where reality goes to die and is unceremoniously buried under a pile of manicured sound bites. He drew a stark, almost painful contrast. On one side, media personalities who pontificate about struggle, pain, and poverty from a safe, comfortable distance, treating real-world issues like abstract concepts to be debated. On the other, individuals who engage directly with the complexities of life, often with a necessary and healthy dose of humor and self-awareness. The implication was clear. One side talked, the other lived. What made this double-barreled takedown so uniquely potent, so devastatingly effective, was its almost accidental, yet perfectly synchronized synergy. Charlie Kirk, the data-driven analyst, the meticulous debunker of progressive narratives, and Joe Rogan, the common-sense comedian, the irreverent challenger of mainstream orthodoxies, launched their critiques independently, from vastly different platforms, with wildly different styles. Yet, together, their arguments formed an unintentional pincer movement, a convergence of logic and laughter that completely, and very publicly, unraveled Sunny Hostin's carefully constructed and fiercely defended on-air persona. One methodically exposed the flawed intellectual foundations upon which her arguments were built. The other, with gleeful abandon, mocked the inherent ridiculousness of the entire structure. It was a perfect storm of critical dismantling.
Charlie Kirk's the founder and CEO of Turning Point USA and the author of the new book, The College Scam. So, Charlie, do you accept the View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here.
The result? A prominent media personality, a woman accustomed to controlling the narrative and basking in the adulation of a loyal studio audience, was left speechless. Her arguments in tatters, her credibility severely damaged. The internet, that ever watchful, ever gleeful arbiter of public humiliation, of course, had an absolute field day. Memes proliferated, spreading like wildfire across social media platforms. Reaction videos dissecting every nuance of the takedowns went viral, racking up millions of views. Sunny Hostin's defenders, usually so quick to leap to her defense, were largely conspicuously silent. And how could they not be? How do you effectively defend against a critique that targets not just your expressed opinions, but the very foundation, the very substance of your public existence? This wasn't just a bad day at the office for Sunny. It was the day her carefully curated media bubble didn't just pop. It spectacularly and very publicly imploded, leaving behind a cautionary tale for any pundit who mistakes an enthusiastically flashing applause sign for genuine, widespread public agreement. Her disgusting, gross elitism, her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world, became the focal point of the critiques. Sunny Hostin, in a now infamous segment on The View, had decided it would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated. She cited statistics, claiming, "What we did not have is white women who voted about 52% for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women is my understanding." This condescending remark, this blatant dismissal of a significant portion of the electorate based on their educational attainment, became a lightning rod for criticism, a perfect encapsulation of the perceived arrogance that Kirk and Rogan so effectively dismantled.
That's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean,
Yeah.
it is a rabies-infested henhouse.
The counter-argument, articulated by Kirk and echoed by Rogan, was simple yet profound. Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. This direct challenge to Hostin's elitist worldview resonated deeply with many viewers who felt increasingly alienated by a media class that seemed to value academic credentials over life experience and common sense. The idea that one could go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach struck a chord, highlighting a growing skepticism towards the value and relevance of certain academic pursuits, especially when contrasted with the practical wisdom gained through lived experience. Sunny Hostin, it seemed, was having a regular week of what many perceived as televised self-congratulation, when the universe, in its infinite and often mischievous wisdom, decided to hit her with a cosmic 1-2 punch. On the political front, Charlie Kirk, the Gen Z whisperer in a suit, armed with graphs that told uncomfortable truths and fueled by more caffeine than a college student during finals week, delivered a methodical, data-driven dismantling. On the cultural front, Joe Rogan, the undisputed podcast overlord, casually, almost effortlessly, disassembled her media credibility in between seemingly unrelated conversations about elk meat, UFOs, and the mysteries of the universe. She likely didn't see it coming, mostly because, as her critics contend, she was too busy monologuing to an adoring and carefully selected studio audience that genuinely believes echo chambers are a vital public service.
And the nerve of this woman, to whom the country has given so much, to try to dump on people who didn't go to college. Look at you, look at your achievements. How do you like the so-called uneducated now, Sunny?
Yeah, and again, by the way, rarely do you get the answer to a question in the question. And her whole question is exactly why there was a rebellion against them.
Yes.
Listen, just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. I always differentiate between knowledge and wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach. I mean, or about North African lesbian poetry. Okay, that's fine, I guess.
The final point, as articulated by Kirk, was particularly damning. He addressed Sunny and her co-host directly, stating, "You guys thought that abortion was going to be this, quasi-zealot religious issue. What I'm saying, though, what gives me promise, is that there are other issues that should animate and drive our politics other than this very divisive one." He highlighted how the media had attempted to force a simplistic up or down referendum on a highly complicated, emotional, and personal issue, while the American people, in their collective wisdom, were indicating that, actually, these other 6 things matter more. This was a direct rebuke of the media's often narrow, agenda-driven focus, a focus that The View frequently exemplified. Charlie Kirk, the founder and CEO of Turning Point USA and a vocal critic of what he terms the college scam, was pointedly asked if he accepted The View's apology regarding a previous controversy. His response was telling. I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. This deflection, this shifting of the focus from his personal feelings to the impact on the young people his organization represents, further underscored his critique of the show's disconnect and its potential for causing real-world harm, particularly when, as alleged, they went after our 5,000 students, 16 and 17-year-olds, that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis.
The episode of you when you're on The View, when you were running for president, you got introduced as our friend Donald Trump.
But does he really want to add President of the United States to his resume? A lot of people would like him to. Please, let's find out, and please welcome my friend, Donald Trump.
That's right.
Whoopi Goldberg gives you a big hug and a kiss. Joy Behar gives you a big hug. Barbara Walters gives you a big hug. And then you actually started winning in the polls, and then the machine started working towards you.
That red hat that says Make America Great Again, might as well just put a sticker on the hat.
Kirk didn't even need to name Sunny Hostin directly in many of his broader critiques. He simply and effectively unpacked the overflowing suitcase of bad takes, of tired talking points, that travel first class on shows like The View. He deconstructed arguments like voter suppression is everywhere, or conservatives hate minorities, or the ever-popular, historically dubious claim that Republicans are turning back the clock to 1952. Then he did what no studio audience, carefully curated for maximum applause, ever dares to do. He ran the numbers, the real ones, the inconvenient ones, the ones that tend to bounce off Sunny Hostin's confidently expressed opinions like Nerf darts off a reinforced brick wall. These were numbers that clearly showed minority voters, in increasing numbers, swinging towards conservatism, precisely because, shockingly, they don't particularly enjoy being talked down to, patronized, or stereotyped by people who make seven-figure salaries to pretend they understand the daily struggle of making a grocery bill. Charlie dug even deeper, relentlessly pointing out the inherent oxymoron, the glaring hypocrisy, of millionaire TV hosts pontificating about oppression and systemic injustice from the comfort of their luxurious Manhattan balconies, sipping on almond milk lattes while passionately explaining to their audience how the entire system is rigged against the little guy. The only thing rigged, Kirk seemed to imply, was the show's applause sign, a sentiment that resonated with a growing number of disillusioned viewers. Then came the elitism nuke, the moment when Sunny Hostin, who occupies a permanent, seemingly unshakable seat in the privileged penthouse of media royalty, became the unwitting yet perfectly emblematic poster child for an entire class of pundits who genuinely believe that having a producer whispering in your ear through an earpiece somehow makes you a philosopher, a modern-day oracle. Charlie Kirk masterfully laid out how these personalities consistently, and often arrogantly, mistake their inflated tax brackets for genuine moral authority, their access to a television studio for a divine mandate to instruct the masses. The nerve of this woman, to whom the country has given so much, to try to dump on people who didn't go to college. Look at you. Look at your achievements, one might say. How do you like the so-called uneducated now, Sunny?
Talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this, and as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it, but we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with it. And the reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last weekend.
Yeah. And while Charlie Kirk's commentary was undeniably methodical, almost surgical, academic in its precision and its teardown of ideological fallacies, it struck precisely where it was intended to hurt the most, at the core of Sunny Hostin's credibility, Not her character, necessarily. Not her fashion sense, which is often impeccable. Not even directly her intellect. Just the cold, hard, increasingly undeniable illusion that Sunny Hostin's particular brand of politics, her carefully cultivated on-air persona, is in any way, shape, or form connected to the real, messy, complex world that exists outside the insulated bubble of the television studio. If this were a boxing match, the towel, stained with the tears of progressive disillusionment, would have been unceremoniously thrown into the ring. But no, that was merely round one of this intellectual beatdown. Enter Joe Rogan, the undisputed intellectual barroom bouncer of America, the man who has built a podcasting empire on fearless, unfiltered, and often hilariously irreverent conversation. Now, Joe Rogan didn't show up to this fight in a tailored suit, nor did he come armed with meticulously prepared pie charts or statistical analyses. No, he metaphorically strolled into the cultural octagon, shirt probably optional, wielding the sacred and often underestimated tools of the everyman: clarity, common sense, and a healthy dose of casual, almost effortless annihilation. His weapon of choice? Unadulterated common sense, which in the rarefied, often surreal media elite circles in which Sunny Hostin effortlessly floats, is often considered a dangerous, potentially subversive narcotic.
I get it. I also hate Joy Behar, so I don't love you, but I also hate that squawking bird, so I hate the whole thing. And frankly, that show, you want to talk about a show that set women back, is The View. You want to talk about that show, if the CIA is engineering Antifa and fucking the Capitol riot, some crazy misogynist engineered The View, because there's nothing worse than The View. In terms of, like, there are so many brilliant women out there, none of them are on The View. None of them have gone near the set of The View.
Rogan's takedown didn't require a lengthy dossier, a complex dissertation, or a panel of expert witnesses. It came wrapped in laughter, delivered with a characteristic shrug, and dripping with a potent blend of mockery and disbelief. See? While Charlie Kirk meticulously dissected the ideology, Joe Rogan went straight for the jugular of the inherent ridiculousness of the medium itself. Specifically, talk shows that masquerade as serious journalism but are, in reality, often little more than televised group therapy sessions for people who seem to be profoundly allergic to genuine introspection or self-doubt. He dismantled, with casual brutality, the very idea of media virtue signaling, like someone calmly, almost patiently, pointing out that the emperor not only has no clothes but is also, rather inexplicably, hosting a segment on the ethics of contemporary swimwear. Rogan, with his usual, almost uncanny blend of gym locker room wisdom and surprisingly profound podcast philosopher chic, openly questioned how these media figures, these self-appointed arbiters of truth and morality, even became cultural gatekeepers in the first place. While Sunny Hostin clutches her pearls over the latest trending hashtags, fretting about the perceived outrages of the day, Rogan is out here, questioning the entire premise of her brand, her platform, her very public existence. He exposed her as the kind of host who skillfully builds a career out of making every single issue, no matter how complex or far-reaching, fundamentally about herself, her feelings, her perspective, all while masterfully claiming to speak for everyone else, for the voiceless, for the oppressed.
You get people thinking, like, if you could stop Hitler by any means necessary, wouldn't you stop Hitler? And so they equate Donald Trump with Hitler and go, here you go, this is our modern Hitler. Do you see what Whoopi Goldberg said?
What'd she say?
Whoopi Goldberg said that Biden could arrest all the Republicans and put them in jail. You just need to see how unhinged this kind of thinking is. Well, you know what Joe Biden could do? Joe Biden, you have to see it, because it's so
on TV.
crazy.
She said it's
on television.
He contrasted this insular, self-referential media bubble with his own extensive experience. His countless hours spent in deep, often challenging conversations with people who have actually lived through crises, made incredibly hard decisions, faced real-world consequences, and, crucially, didn't feel the need to consult their publicist before daring to have an unscripted, authentic opinion. The contrast he painted was brutal, unflinching, and deeply resonant. One side of the media, he implied, talks about pain, poverty, and politics as if they were attractions at a theme park, to be experienced vicariously, then commented upon with detached authority. The other side lives it, discusses it with honesty and vulnerability, and, God forbid, sometimes even laughs at the sheer, unadulterated insanity of it all. Rogan, much like Kirk, didn't even need to mention Sunny Hostin by name for his critique to land with devastating accuracy. That, in itself, is the beauty, the artistry, of a roast so potent, so precise, so universally applicable that the intended target flinches, winces, even when they're not directly, explicitly hit. He spoke with characteristic candor about talk shows increasingly becoming echo chambers of elite self-regard, sterile environments where uncomfortable realities go to die, unceremoniously buried under a suffocating pile of manicured sound bites and carefully pre-approved talking points. Where Kirk employed rigorous analysis, Rogan deployed withering ridicule. While Charlie meticulously revealed the numbers, Joe, with a knowing smirk, exposed the underlying absurdity. And the result for Sunny Hostin was undeniably the same. A woman whose entire on-air persona, whose very career depends on never being seriously, credibly challenged, suddenly, jarringly, looked like a poorly written, almost cartoonish character in a biting satire about the vacuity of modern television news.
I mean, The View has to be, if you average out The View hosts, among the dumbest people on television. And so it's like they say the thing that people are thinking, but they say it very directly, so they expose whatever truth. But
I don't think some of them are dumb.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think Sunny Hostin's
You think it's
dumb.
deliberate?
I think she's ideologically driven, and they have blinders on, for sure. I don't think Sunny's dumb. But Whoopi is certainly not the brightest person. And what she just said just doesn't make any sense. It's just like so silly to say. It's not a well thought out.
It's a rare, almost mystical occurrence when political strategy and raw cultural instinct align so perfectly, so devastatingly, to obliterate a single dominant narrative. It's rarer still when this feat is accomplished without overt venom, without direct confrontation, and, most remarkably, without even needing to utter a single specific name. Charlie Kirk and Joe Rogan didn't destroy Sunny Hostin by directly calling her out in a traditional sense. They destroyed her, or at least the carefully constructed illusion she represents, by relentlessly, unsparingly calling out the world she so comfortably, so confidently inhabits. A world where prepackaged talking points consistently replace critical thinking and where the volume of applause routinely substitutes for genuine public reality. They effectively made that world look like what, to many, it truly is. A glitter-covered, self-congratulatory echo chamber, afflicted with dangerous delusions of grandeur. And in doing so, they didn't just tear down a single television persona. They exposed an entire influential class of pundits whose only discernible qualification often seems to be their ability to be on the right television set, at the right politically charged time, with the right pre-approved moral panic conveniently queued up and ready to deploy. What happens next in this unfolding drama? Likely, very little, at least on the surface. Sunny Hostin will in all probability continue to go on air, pretending the intellectual evisceration didn't happen, that the critiques don't matter, that her worldview remains unshakable. The applause sign in the studio will undoubtedly keep flashing on cue. The coffee will keep being served at the perfect temperature, and the carefully scripted outrage will continue to flow. But something, undeniably, has changed. You can't unsee what Kirk and Rogan, from their distinct yet complementary vantage points, so clearly, so brutally revealed. Once the curtain of illusion is pulled back, it rarely, if ever, closes again with the same convincing opacity. And while Sunny Hostin may never publicly acknowledge the profound breakdown, the shattering of her carefully crafted facade, the internet, that relentless, unforgiving archivist of public moments, already has. The memes, the clips, the side-by-side edits, the endless stream of commentary. It's all meticulously archived, saved for posterity, and ready to be re-aired, reshared, every single time someone naively or perhaps disingenuously utters the phrase, "But she makes such good points." She doesn't need to cry on air. The breakdown, though perhaps quiet and invisible to some, was total, comprehensive, and delivered with devastating precision by two men who, on the surface, don't agree on much. Except, apparently, on the inherent comedic tragedy of Sunny Hostin's televised Enlightenment tours. One moment, she's the self-proclaimed moral compass of daytime TV. The next, she's the unwitting and undeniably humorous punchline in a dual-hemisphere demolition of epic proportions.